For our second segment, we're joined by Francine Raveney, the former director of the European Women's Audiovisual Network. Welcome, Francine. You were in Cannes for the film festival. Did the shadow of the 2017 Harvey Weinstein affair loom large?
So completely. Throughout the festival, Thierry Frémaux had obviously taken into account the importance of the Weinstein affair and also the problems of gender inequality in the film industry, especially in Cannes Film Festival, lack of female directors. And so throughout the festival, there were many different panels and events which really acknowledged this problem of gender inequality. One of them was a walk up the steps by 82 prominent women in the industry, and that was to acknowledge the 82 women who had been nominated since the festival was inaugurated in the 1940s. So only 82 women nominated for prize. Had many different things, many different panels throughout. Really exciting. A charter was signed by Thierry Frémaux, and in this charter, he actually signed up to agreeing to aim for this, like 2020, by 2020, gender equality for cast and crew and better representation of male and female on the decision-making panels. So it was really an exciting festival. And actually, there was hardly a day that went by without some conference on gender equality. And then one thing that really shocked me at the end, actually, was the Asia Argento being on stage talking about her experience when she was only 21. Because it was a prize-giving ceremony. You expect something very formal, the prizes are being given out. She just came on stage and she just said it out there. Harvey Weinstein raped me when I was 21. I predict he'll never come back again. And that was an incredibly powerful statement from her. And it was as though Cannes had acknowledged that it had been home to the stomping ground of Harvey Weinstein, and it was trying to address the problem and redress that issue. So I felt like that was a positive message on the part of Cannes. Now we have to see in reality how many female directors and how great a diversity they have in the film content as well keeps on being shown in Cannes, because that's sort of the issue as well with this festival.
So, did the studios then respond to the Harvey Weinstein affair by changing the tone? Were they happy to go along with this? Did they send more female representatives? Were they happy to have this conversation? Or were they kind of slightly nervous because there is a sense that there is more to come out? There is a feeling that maybe it's not just Harvey Weinstein, that there were other moguls, other prominent film industry personalities who've also perhaps taken advantage of their opportunities.
Completely. I mean, this is something that Asia actually mentioned when she spoke on stage. It was a very powerful speech, and she said, "There are many of you still in the audience. We know who you are." And I thought, wow, this is a really powerful space for her to speak in this context. I think that change is happening, whether some people like it or not. Change is happening, and in Cannes, you felt very clear that the producers were really backing the whole initiative for greater equality and greater diversity. But then also diversity of content. There was one film which I'd like to mention, which I think was very special, which was called Girl. And this is a film about a boy who finds out that actually he's a woman, he's a girl, and he's a ballet dancer. And it's a beautiful film, which was very well received in the festival. It won the Caméra d'Or, director Lucas Gons. And I think this type of content is also pushing boundaries about identity. So for me, it's a powerful festival.
Well, that's interesting then. Do you think that one of the lasting impacts of the Harvey Weinstein affair, particularly for the Cannes Film Festival, will be to have on show more films that talk about human rights themes or gender equality, to pay more attention to who's in front of the camera, but also who's behind it?
In this festival, I felt that completely. In terms of the composition of the jury as well, there were more women than men on the jury this year. Kate Blanchett was the president. In terms of the selection, I think that it was a very political decision, actually, by the jury for the Palme d'Or to go for Shoplifters by Hirokazu Koreeda, but also then the Grand Prix going to Spike Lee for Black Klansman. For me, that was really a political message. That was a powerful statement to choose that film as well. And Kate Blanchett herself said, we can't not be moved by the political issue at stake at the moment. So for me, Cannes was very much being sensitive in a way it hasn't been maybe in previous years to issues that affect society as a whole. And I think this with not just harassment issues from Harvey Weinstein, but also to do with the current, if you like, political context in which we're living right now, where there's some nationalist statements being brought back that we weren't expecting, and Cannes was very much like thought-provoking and trying to stand up for other voices, and I thought it was great.
Finally then, it seems that the atmosphere at Cannes has been affected mostly by the Anglo-Saxon response to Harvey Weinstein, Me Too, because you all know, as you're based in Strasbourg, that the French response hasn't been entirely supportive of the Me Too campaign. Was there any sense that those great names of the French film industry were there to lend support to the Ancien Régime, as we might call it?
Actually, this much France, I almost felt like maybe the French government had an impact really in the composition of many things in this festival. I felt like France was very present in a way that hasn't been the case before. Certainly, the French Association Deuxième Regard were very present. They're based in Paris, in mobilising people and in making sure that there were lots of women involved. There was a huge panel event between the Swedish Ministry of Culture and the French Ministry of Culture, this Françoise Nyssen. And that was a really powerful moment. And that was all about change, but it was also in France. And then there's a fabulous book that's been brought out by the French actress Aïssa Maïga, which is called Noir n'est pas mon métier. Being black is not my job. And she's an actress who suffered horrendous discrimination in France. I mean, it's really quite shocking. When she's gone for casting sessions, people have said to her things like, are you really playing a lawyer? You're black. It's like, wow, that's an incredible statement. She was always being cast to be like either the cleaner or the slave. So this is just kind of shocking. But they had she organised a walk as well up the red carpet with everyone involved with that book as well to draw attention to the problem of not only gender inequality, but racism in the French film industry. And that was powerful. So there were a lot of powerful moments. I think that the political will in France right now is to bring about change. And even directors who in the past were maybe reticent to be considered female directors, I think nowadays there is a change we can see. There was a very interview with Emmanuel Berco, was interviewed alongside Eva Husson. Eva Husson had a filming competition, Les Filles du Soleil. And Emmanuel Berco was saying, oh, well, I never suffered discrimination. And Eva Husson said, well, I have. As a woman, we get lower budgets, and we're not always taken seriously. And so I think for me, this was like of an acknowledgement that in France, yes, they have the highest rate of female directors, something like 25% compared to the rest of Europe, which is around 10%, US more like 7%. But you have like 60% female directors studying in La Femis in France in the main school. So actually, there's a terrible drop-off rate because you have so many female directors. You also had Varda aussi, who was on the red carpet. So it was really very French, I felt, and very almost proving that France was committed to change. And that was a very powerful message throughout the festival, for sure.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that. Nuno, do you want to come in on the impact of Me Too and perhaps how Hollywood can be a bit more inclusive in its approach to women, and as Francine has hinted at, perhaps, and given our last conversation about Panther, do a better job on representing other social concerns?
Well, what you've seen with these social movements that you just referenced, like Me Too, is that it's emerged from the example of Hollywood and the horrific treatment of people involved in the film industry, but it's also branched out of that and has been a reflection of how people are being treated in various different sectors, in employment, various different aspects of community and public life and the private sector. So there's been an opportunity to demonstrate how the key messages and the core themes are being reflected in people's everyday experiences. In terms of its sustainability, I think there is some key questions that need to be asked in terms of how it proceeds. So how does it remain focused on specific demands it's asking for, and how do those who are leading the campaigns and who are most vocal and visible and are prominent established figures within the social movements, how will they be positioning themselves going forward as well? So, will they be looking to continuously critique and question and challenge? Will they be wanting to work within the systems and the industries that need changing and need radical overhaul? So there are a number of questions as to how it will either be sustainable or eventually will decline based on the actions of the established leadership and where they want to see collaboration or a continued challenge going forward in terms of improving the portrayal of different groups in the film industry, and indeed having better opportunities for marginalised communities. I think there'll be a serious question mark over how the commissioning process works to fund films and to fund projects that want to tackle these issues or want to be produced and directed and controlled by people who represent these communities, and the expectations that are then placed upon them as well. So as we talked about Black Panther, the idea that was it's going to be the watershed moment of changing the focus of black culture in the film industry, of thinking about how we create narratives around the issues of race. And of course, based on our conversation, that's probably not the case. But the question will be going forward, when we do commission pieces of work, what are the expectations going to be placed upon people to actually go out and make really radical stuff, and actually how that will then be controlled by the industry and celebrated, and how it will be promoted. I think it will affect the longevity of the issues that we're talking about.
Paul, do you think the fact that we are now in a new age of audiovisual distribution, so to speak, with Netflix, Amazon, Google, Apple offering really, really, really powerful streaming alternatives, that the Hollywood industry has an incentive now to take on board some of these social concerns in order to stay relevant, because otherwise they could easily be bypassed by these new players. Is that relevant, or do you think he who owns, or the organizations that own the content, basically remain powerful players?
Yeah, I think it's capitalism when it fundamentally comes down to it. There are a kind of multitude of layers and levels of distribution and access, but they will eventually, in the very short term, become increasingly centralized and kind of monopolized by the existing broadcasters, and so it won't actually make that much difference. I think the internet is eventually going to become a much more controlled environment. However much the liberals in society want to make it free, actually the right and the capitalists will end up having a lot more control of it through to the threat that it imposes. And I think something like Me Too is very interesting, because actually it educates oppressors on how to do how they oppress better. Just like they're very skillful at that. They're very intelligent at that. And often it's the state that is very important, and they don't have the courage to make the decisions. By which I mean, sort of to some extent, the EU as well. So, for example, something like Me Too, and I say it in relation to disability as well, and I've said it in our last podcast. Some main state funders should now say, right, 5 years, we only fund films by women, made by women, that have 50-60% production by women only, and they don't have the courage of that. And it's the same with disability. If you really want to create justice, you implement justice. You don't reform the edges, because actually oppressors and structures are truly genius at overriding them and using them to their own purpose. And that is the true tragedy of this. That actually you need someone to stay up, something like the Film Council in Britain. To some extent, the media programs in the EU, right? 5 years, put it in a simple level, straight white men get nothing. You've had the last 40 years of the money, so actually for the next 40 years you get nothing, because by and large what you made in the 40 years you've had it is crap. And so actually when you say, well, what we're making is crap, well, fair enough, you made crap, we're allowed to make crap, but actually you need to have superstructural decisions made that will have absolute impact immediately. And I think that's not going to happen, sadly. So such is life.
Francine, you wear a number of hats. I know from your Council of Europe work that you have been making powerful representations about promoting the gender equality strategy of the Council of Europe. You heard from Paul there that we need to do far more in order to promote gender equality, and it actually means really making serious decisions about who is in front of the camera and who is behind it. Is the film industry, European or North American, really ready for that kind of radical change?
Well, the European film industry, and I want to specifically refer to, I guess, Council of Europe member states, that's a 47 states, but also those member states within the Council of Europe that are part of the Euromage Film Fund. I'll mention those two because at pan-European level, we have a recommendation for gender equality in the film industry. And this recommendation has been taken on board by different funding bodies and different broadcasters already to promote greater gender equality. And then the other aspect I mentioned is Euromage has a strategy which is 50-50 by 2020. And so whilst it's not a quota, it's a very big encouragement, as you mentioned, to make sure that that public money that goes into those European art house films distributed in kind of in a way that more money is going to films with female directors. So it's actually a strategy that we have. It's a soft strategy because it isn't yet a quota, but it is a strategy that we have in place for the Euromage Film Fund. However, I would say one thing where I'm totally in agreement. In a way, structures of power do learn from movements like Me Too. So I think we have to be a little smart in the way that we respond to situations, because power structures are there to kind of harness the same situations of oppression. So in a way, I feel a little bit. It's great that 82 women walked at the red carpet in Cannes. But who facilitated that? You know, it was within the structure of the festival. And so I think these power structures are an issue. And my only thing that I can say is, for my part, I feel confident that within the Euromage Film Fund, we can have a great awareness about the distribution of public money. But remember that the Euromage Film Fund is supporting those films which have already got some selective support in different countries, which have already been chosen in different countries. So the North American industry in that way, that's a different strategy that needs to be taken. But I think we really have to be smart in the way we respond to the situation, because it's not just by standing up and complaining that change will actually happen. We have to be smart. And the basic means of oppressing women and greater diversity in the film industry is by not giving them access to money and power. So we have to try and make sure that, at least with the public money, we can empower more women and people from different diverse backgrounds to make their projects and have them distributed. But it's a big old battle, for sure.